The slap knocked Angela's earbud onto the pavement. She touched her burning cheek, the skin beneath her fingers throbbing under the bright Ohio sun, and said quietly, "You just assaulted me." No one moved. James Walker kept recording from his porch as Sergeant Mark Callahan reached for his cuffs, his face twisted with arrogant authority. Then, a sleek black city SUV turned onto Cedar Ridge, its emergency lights flashing without sound. Angela stayed calm, but the driver's face went pale the moment she stepped out. Callahan had missed something, and the truth was seconds away. 20 minutes earlier, Cedar Ridge had seemed almost peaceful enough to make Angela forget how quickly ordinary things could change. The neighborhood sat on the northern edge of West Haven, Ohio, where broad sidewalks curved beneath mature maple trees and carefully trimmed hedges separated expensive brick homes from the street. Saturday sunlight flashed across polished windows and chrome mailboxes, while sprinklers hissed over green lawns. Angela Carter had been running at an easy pace. At 48, she was athletic, wearing a faded gray sweatshirt and dark running clothes that carried the damp marks of a long jog. Sweat glistened along her temples, her breathing elevated, carrying the quiet rhythm of a woman completely at home in her own skin. Her sweatshirt was old enough that the cuffs had softened from years of washing. She could have easily replaced it, but she liked the way it fit. A small zippered pouch rested securely at her waist, holding her credentials and phone. One earbud carried soft music, the other left her aware of traffic. That was how she heard the patrol cruiser slow behind her. Inside the cruiser, Sergeant Mark Callahan watched her pass a silver Tesla parked in a driveway. There had been no alarm, no call about a burglary, no description of a suspect, and no resident waving for help. Just Angela, a black woman in a neighborhood where officers like Callahan assumed she was an outsider. Callahan drove another half block, checking his mirror. When she didn't look back at him, his irritation flared. He transformed a feeling into suspicion, pulled to the curb, and hit a short burst of his siren. Angela stopped, removed one earbud, and turned toward him. "Morning," she said neutrally. "I need to know where you're coming from," Callahan demanded, stepping out with his hands resting heavy near his belt. When Angela calmly asked if a crime had been reported, Callahan's jaw tightened. He heard a challenge where there was only dignity. "I'm asking the questions," he snapped, taking a step into her personal space. He had no idea that the woman he was trying to intimidate had spent 25 years mastering the very law he was sworn to uphold. Angela felt an old heaviness settle inside her chest. She knew this rhythm all too well. A vague accusation, a demand for submission, and instant irritation when a citizen dared to ask for their rights. She had grown up in South Chicago, the daughter of a public school teacher and a steelworker who taught her that true authority did not rely on volume or force. Angela had worked her way through law school at night while serving as a street officer, rising through the ranks of metropolitan police departments across the country. She had commanded task forces, reformed corrupt precincts, and earned a national reputation as a fiercely strategic, reform-minded executive. She had spent her life believing that institutions could become better than the flawed instincts of the people inside them. "I saw you checking out that Tesla back there," Callahan said, stepping even closer, his voice dropping into a low threat. "Show me some identification or we're going to have a serious problem." "I am on a public sidewalk, Sergeant," Angela replied, smoothly, her posture straight and composed. "You have no reasonable suspicion to detain me. I am going to finish my run." That refusal ignited Callahan's temper. He had spent 20 years in West Haven enforcing his own brand of street discipline, accustomed to immediate compliance from anyone who looked like Angela. He reached out to grab her wrist. Instinctively, Angela raised her arm to block his grip, keeping her hands open and non-threatening. The physical rejection pushed Callahan over the edge. In a flash of blind rage, he swung his open hand across her face. The strike echoed down the quiet suburban street, knocking her earbud onto the asphalt. Across the road, retired transit mechanic James Walker stopped on his porch, holding up his smartphone to record the entire encounter. Two neighbors froze beside their garages, stunned into silence. Callahan stood panting, his hand still hovering in the air, momentarily shocked by his own impulse. Yet instead of backing down, his embarrassment hardened into cruelty. He reached for his steel handcuffs, determined to cover his assault with an arrest. But as the metal clicked open, the low rumble of an engine broke the silence. A black city-issued Ford Explorer swept around the corner, its grille lights flashing red and blue. The vehicle pulled sharply to the curb, blocking Callahan's cruiser. Callahan smirked, believing his shift lieutenant had arrived to back him up. "You picked the wrong day to resist, lady," he muttered, stepping around Angela to greet the vehicle. The driver's door swung open and Captain Karen Myers, the acting interim head of the department, stepped out. Myers was a veteran administrator who knew every legal liability in the county. She walked briskly toward the scene, her eyes darting from James Walker recording on the porch to the red mark rising on Angela's cheek. "Callahan, what's going on here?" Myers asked, her voice tight with immediate tension. "Glad you're here, Captain," Callahan said, pointing aggressively at Angela. "Found this woman casing homes on Hawthorne. When I stopped her, she refused to identify herself, became combative, and physically interfered with an officer. I'm taking her in for obstruction and assault." Myers turned her gaze from Callahan to the woman standing quietly on the sidewalk. As Angela raised her chin, wiping a trace of sweat from her cheek, Myers' expression completely changed. The color drained from her face, her eyes widening in absolute horror. Myers recognized the face from every regional press release, state bulletin, and executive briefing distributed over the past 3 months. She stepped past Callahan, ignoring his outstretched handcuffs entirely. "Captain," Callahan asked, confused by her sudden stillness, "what are you doing?" Myers didn't answer him. She stopped 2 feet from Angela, her breath catching in her throat, realizing that the survival of her entire department was balancing on a single second. "Chief Carter," Myers said, her voice shaking so noticeably that James Walker heard it from his porch. "Chief Carter, I had no idea you were in the district already." Callahan froze. The handcuffs hung loosely from his index finger. "Chief?" he stammered, looking between Myers and the woman in the faded gray sweatshirt. "Captain, what are you talking about? She's a runner." Angela unzipped the small pouch at her waist and pulled out a leather badge case. She opened it, revealing the gold shield of the West Haven Police Department, bearing the title, Chief of Police. "My contract began at midnight, Sergeant Callahan," Angela said, her voice dropping into a register of absolute cold command that silenced the entire street. "I moved into the district 3 days ago. I was taking a morning run to inspect the jurisdiction I now lead." Callahan's mouth opened, but no words came out. His face turned a sickly pale white as his mind frantically replayed the last 5 minutes. The illegal stop, the fabricated suspicion, the racial profiling, and the physical strike that was currently recorded on high-definition video from the porch across the street. "Chief," Callahan managed to choke out, taking a frantic half-step backward, his hands trembling. The sun was in my eyes. You didn't identify yourself. I thought you were a suspect." "You didn't ask for my identity, Sergeant," Angela interrupted, her gaze cutting through him like broken glass. "You asserted my constitutional rights, and when you resorted to violence—" She turned her eyes to Captain Myers. "Captain, disarm Sergeant Callahan immediately. Collect his badge, his sidearm, and his department-issued phone. He is relieved of duty, effective right now." Callahan stood paralyzed as Captain Myers stepped forward, her hands shaking as she unholstered his weapon and took his badge. The weight of his own actions crashed down upon him under the watchful eyes of the citizens he had spent decades intimidating. He was escorted to the back seat of the SUV, the very seat where he had placed so many others, as a second patrol vehicle arrived to transport him to headquarters for booking on official assault charges. Angela picked her earbud up from the pavement, wiped the dust from it, and placed it securely back into her pouch. She walked across the street toward James Walker, who was still holding his phone. "Thank you for recording, sir," Angela said, offering her hand to the retired mechanic. "Accountability requires evidence, and your community needed both today." Walker took her hand, his eyes filled with a mixture of awe and profound relief. "We've been waiting 20 years for someone to hold him accountable, Chief," he whispered. That afternoon, Chief Angela Carter stood at the podium inside West Haven Police Headquarters, addressing a packed room of journalists, officers, and community leaders. She didn't speak of vengeance, nor did she present herself merely as a victim of a corrupt officer. She spoke of structural overhaul, mandatory body camera enforcement, and the non-negotiable dignity guaranteed to every citizen, regardless of their zip code or skin color. True authority is not demonstrated by the gun on a belt or the badge on a chest. It is carried in the unyielding strength of those who refuse to let prejudice strip them of their dignity, turning moments of public humiliation into the foundation for lasting justice.